David, who goes by he, him, from Washington State. And he wants to talk about the impracticality of bathroom bans. So, hey, David, tell us about the impracticality of bathroom bans.
Well, I just thank you so much for bringing me onto the show, by the way. I'm grateful for this. And I just wanted to say that the bans that are being passed in a lot of state legislatures are very impractical. And that the reason I say so has to do with how would you? The only way you could is if you had a cop whose job was to sit in front of every bathroom door in America and look at the, for lack of being indelicate, genitals of everybody going in. I wouldn't want to be that cop. I don't imagine either of you would want to be, and I can't think of anybody who would. So how would you enforce that? The only thing that these are rules are, and that's the only thing that it could be used for. It reminds me of the sodomy laws, which were used to harass gay men. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to do. There's no practical way of actually applying it in anything like universal or fair way.
Yeah, the whole bathroom ban thing is, it's a frustrating topic and also kind of a funny topic at the same time, because like you're hitting it right on the mark in that like there is no good way to enforce this, even if people thought that this was a necessary thing to do. And you're right, really the only way to do it would be to inspect everybody's genitals as they go into the bathroom, which is making it much worse for the people that you're trying to protect, because if the goal is to prevent people from acting like that around women, you're now forcing everybody to have that done to them. So it really contradicts the things that people are saying they support with these bathroom bans. And you're right, there's nothing practical about it. There's no way that this can end well for anybody. And the way that I handle a lot of these discussions, at the end of the day, you have to, at some point, be willing to accept self-ID. Like at some point, you're going to have to get there because there's too many variables involved with what categorizes you in one category or another. At what point do you draw the line between male and female? Like, where do you put that? Because like, does it stop at like genital inspections? Does it stop at chromosome testing? Does it stop at like, I don't know. There's so many variables, and no matter how you define this, at some point, you're going to have to accept that not all of those variables are going to line up. And so the concept even of a person who is a woman and who is a man, like no matter how you try to quantify that or qualify that based on physical attributes, you can't do it. You cannot do it purely on that. You have to allow for some level of self-ID.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, there are people. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There are people
no, totally.
who chromosomally are XX, but their physical presentation is male, and vice versa. And you also have for persons who have an extra chromosome, such as in Klinefelter syndrome, and in other conditions where they may be XYY or XYX. So how do we classify those folks? And what do you do about intersex persons? Realistically, things are not nearly as cut and dry as people want to make it out to be. And I just see these laws as not really being about bathrooms, not really being about women at all or about protecting women. It's really just a crude attempt at harassment, trying to make life even more difficult for a population that the person sponsoring these laws don't like. And it's really nothing more than using the legal system as a weapon. There's nothing more good than that.
Yeah, I mean, terribly, it does remind me of James Acaster, who's a British comedian. He makes a joke about how, we looked around and we're like, who's had it too good for too long? Trans people. And so started, making these laws. But I fully agree with you on pretty much every point, that it's all so much more complicated. But then bringing it back to just practicality, this isn't even necessarily about being trans. When we think about, like, I have a little boy and he comes into the bathroom with me because I'm not going to have a 2-year-old go into a public restroom by himself, right? Is there an age limit that they're going to include? What if they say by the age of 7 they should be going into bathrooms by themselves, but I still don't feel safe with that in particular place where we are? What if at the age of 5 he looks like he's 8, because not everybody develops age-wise on the same scale? So is someone going to stop and police me from taking my son into the bathroom I feel the most comfortable bringing him into, where I can monitor what's going on? Is that not going to be allowed because it's a someone they would identify as a boy in a women's restroom? And just not to in any way diminish the fact that I am not the most impacted party when it comes to these things. I am a cis woman, but I look at it and I'm like, this impacts every person, even if they're thinking that it doesn't. You know, I think about, I grew up in kind of Washington, Eastern Oregon area, so I'm actually kind of from around where you are. But there were women I knew who were extremely conservative Christian and who were extremely badass and like worked for like the Forest Service and things like that. And their presentation was very, you know, could be seen as very masculine looking. And then when these laws started coming up, they were very for them. And I was just kind of pointing out, like, you're going to put yourself in a position where someone's going to start just questioning your gender simply because you've been out in the woods all day and you didn't do glam. You know, that this is going to impact you as well. And that was something that was a difficult argument for some reason to make, simply because they didn't see it that way. These impact everybody.
Yeah, and their end goal here, based on the way that they are framing it, is like they don't want trans people in the bathroom, period. Like all of these lead to, wherever they take it, they all lead to trans people are not allowed in any bathroom. But go ahead. I want to hear your thoughts.
Sorry, I wanted to dovetail on something that Sofia had just mentioned when she was talking about her child. This would also impact the parents of children who have autism or have developmental concerns, you know. There are some persons who physically may be 20 and 25 years old and yet are not mentally in a place where they can function independently, say a person with Downs. What are you going to do about those folks? Going to jeopardize that community and say, okay, you're not allowed to use a restroom either, and the parents of these folks or their caregivers are now in a position where if they're not the same gender of that child, they can't go out in public with them for fear of having to use a public restroom and be caught up in this whole nonsense. It's really just creating nothing more than a climate of fear, harassment, division, and hate. And, you know, there's a lot of persons out there that want to pretend that trans people haven't existed until recently, but I, as somebody who grew up in the Catholic Church, I'm an atheist now, anti-atheist actually, but having grown up Catholic, I remembered the story about Pope Joan. Was a woman who became Pope in the 9th century, believe it or not. You know, there has been, in the historical record, if you read back far enough, even the Greeks and the Romans had trans people. You know, trans people have always been around and always will be. And these laws aren't going to make trans people go away. It's really nothing more than hate and division being directed at a community that has already got to do with entirely too much. You think about, you open the news, for some time I look at it, you know.
I think we're...
the audio is cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, you're breaking up a bit.
But yeah, and I'm a trans guy that unfortunately has to use bathrooms. And like the absolute best answer to all of this is having like individual bathrooms with the door that goes all the way down to the floor and the walls that go all the way down to the floor, so you can be private in your own space. And then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what body you have, because everybody is safe and everybody's like treated equally in that. But yeah, the way all these laws end up working, and we see this for all varieties of trans people, but oftentimes people are focusing on trans women and whether or not they can use certain bathrooms, and they'll say trans women go use the men's bathroom, which you'll see on the media as well. People like pictures of a trans woman using a men's bathroom and then them freaking out about that person being in there, like, well, this is the thing that you asked for. But then if something that when you discuss with people, even the mention of trans men seems to throw the arguments like into interesting places, because people forget that we exist at all. And so the arguments don't stand as soon as you throw a trans man into the mix, because if the goal is to protect people who are assigned female, and you want all of them to be in their own private space because they don't believe that I'm a man, they believe that I'm a confused woman, and so I should belong in the women's bathroom. But if I were to walk into a women's bathroom, people would be concerned and I'd get thrown out because I make people uncomfortable because I am seen as a man. So then the alternative is, am I allowed to use the men's bathroom? And like some people are okay with that, but others are like, no, well, that's unsafe. You shouldn't be allowed to go in there. And it's like, but okay, where do we go? We don't go out in public, and that's it. So the whole arguments end up being contradictory on all fronts. But yeah, it's a garbage argument. It's totally illogical, and really just the thing about the bathrooms is there's no need for our bathrooms to exist the way that they currently do. And the fact that we are looking at it as like, oh, we have to have this argument because what bathroom are they going to use? Like, this system is so arbitrary, just get rid of it. And that's how I feel about a lot of our systems. Just like, we don't have to make this thing that doesn't work keep working. We don't have to like try to revive this thing. Just start over. Do something better than this, because we can do something better than this. And it's a simple answer. Like, it's not hard, and yet people want to make it so hard.
Can you think of how much more emotionally and psychologically safe high school and middle school would feel if you just had your own bathroom cubicle? Like, yeah. I feel like some of the most intense feeling confrontations I ever had as like a 6th grade girl were in the bathroom. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. Single stalls would make life better for everyone.
Yep.
Sorry, David, you were about to say something?
Short stature. Yeah, as somebody who grew up as the shorter stature of your average male, the most terrifying moments of my childhood took place in the school bathroom as well, just for, because I couldn't fend anybody off. They were like, a foot taller than me. But honestly, I think even more practical, like even for the folks who say, oh, we don't want to spend all the money to do bathrooms differently, is why not just mind your own fucking business, right? Like, I don't care what rules you have if you're in the urinal next to me. If you can do it and you've got to go, I mean, any port in a storm, right? I mean, I've been in positions where I had to go really bad before, and for whatever reason, the men's room wasn't working, or there, it was full of people or whatever. If you gotta go, you gotta go. Why do we have to have gendered bathrooms at all? Like, why not just say, look,
yeah, we don't.
Whatever. Just pay attention to your own business and don't bother other people.
Yeah, and I mean, thinking about the notion, I feel very aware of privilege in this conversation for myself, partially because I was just thinking about it. I'm like, I go into the men's bathroom all the time, and I know no one's ever going to call me on it because I do it because there's no line, and I'm not a trans person, so I'll just be like, yeah, I went in there and whatever. And because the point of the law is so clearly to oppress trans people, like, I just sort of know it would never apply to me, which is so fucked up. I almost hesitate to say it because it feels weird to acknowledge that, like, yeah, I can just do this thing, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have a great conclusion for that. It just fucking is horrible. That's all. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for calling. There is another caller we should jump on and get to, but I absolutely appreciate your perspective so much, and definitely call in again if you have some more thoughts to share.